Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. The calendar has turned to August, which means it's one of the busiest times of the year in our gardens and yards. With the harvest season upon us, we turn to our experts for the latest tips and information. Back with us this afternoon from the University of Vermont are Leonard Perry and Ann Hazelrig. Good to see you again.
Good to be back, Judy.
Well, let's start with Leonard. Now, you've been doing gardening since, what have you been doing in the garden since last month's show?
A lot of watering.
Right.
As you know, it's been very dry.
Right.
I think this summer I've had at my place monitor with a rain gauge an inch or more twice. Now that's what we should be getting each week for the plant. So I spend a lot of time on the end of a hose as opposed to overhead sprinklers because those are quite wasteful. You can lose, especially on a dry day and really hot, half the water can just evaporate.
Oh, no kidding.
Not end up on the lawns. Lawns that just leave, let them go dormant, don't mow them. Have been saving a lot on fuel, not mowing this summer too.
Exactly. Now you brought some flowers to show us?
I did. First I brought a picture we got from a viewer, from Joanne Stevens, sent this picture in, and it's an annual larkspur. It's pinkish, but they're generally, and it's a double form, a lot of times they're single, and usually purple. Down at Fort Ticonderoga at the King's Garden, they have a lot of the purple ones, and I've gotten several questions down there, everyone asking, what is this? Looks like a delphinium, it's shorter, you can see very fine leaves. So that's just something, a neat annual flower. And I brought a couple pictures of some perennial flowers too. One's Joe Pye, which is a native plant, and it gets kind of tall. Now these are a couple of the cultivars. There's several out there. On the left is Little Joe. It's only about 5 feet tall. And Early Riser, it's about 8 feet on the right. And usually you get 6-7 feet is probably what the native one is, but they're great for pollinators. You can see one year I had a lot of the monarchs on these, and they do quite well. They like moist areas too, which is good if you have kind of a moist wet, damp area, that they really come in and they establish, and they're really tough plants, good perennials. Nice.
And so I know that you've brought some cone flowers in with you.
I have. Just wanted to show these. There's so many on the market now, and the thing, a lot of them are short-lived. I've got some information on my website. We'll give it at the end about which have done better in my trials and lasted the longest. But the traditional purple cone flower is, of course, purple. This is a variation called Lilliput, a little bit shorter, maybe 2 feet instead of the 3 foot on average. That's the favorite of the pollinators. They like the native, ones. Next best they prefer is the white version, like White Swan. That's been around quite a while. The ones they don't really go for are these fancy poodly, frou-frou kind of ones. This is called Secret Lust. This is very double, and what happens is all these flower parts that the pollinators like are turned into petals on these double ones, so they really don't have anything to go for there. So they really don't go for those. If you put some in, you can have 1 or 2 plants of that, but put some of the others in for them as well.
The cone flowers, okay.
Yeah.
And I understand your plant diagnostic clinic and the Master Gardener Helpline have been getting lots of calls about a particular plant.
Yes, we have. It's wild parsnip, and it's in bloom right now. You can see it all along the roadsides. It's got a really pretty yellow flower there. And the next slide shows it.
One of the things to look at in that one too is, you notice the brown parts, those are the seeds.
Yeah.
It's still in bloom and the seeds are forming. They form seeds that quickly, which is amazing.
And that's a major problem because...
Which is when you end up with something like this.
Yeah, roadsides are just covered with it. And yeah, really the way to control it is to mow it before it produces those seeds, but at this point...
Yeah, and you can see it grows in the fields and crowding out everything. You think, oh, isn't that too early for goldenrod? Well, that's not. That's the parsnip.
Yeah, and Leonard was saying earlier that it really likes sun, so anything that's sunny and open, these things just fill in. It's a very aggressive invader. So this is another picture, a close-up of the yellow flower and the leaves. Kind of looks like parsley or celery,
right,
to me.
And then the reason why this is such a problem, we've got a picture that's coming up that is pretty graphic.
It is very graphic. So
just a warning.
Yeah, but this was a young woman from Essex. She posted this on her Facebook, and she wanted people to know how dangerous this weed can be because it has a sap that if you brush it or cut it, it exudes a sap that combined with sunshine causes these incredible blisters on your legs, and it's just devastating.
And I think in her story, she was walking through a field.
Right, and I think she was sweating, and that compounds the problem, in the sun and working all day, and then
yeah, I think, you know, one of the problems now that's become so prevalent, as we saw in those slides already, people are, it's almost in everyone's yard, or if you have light in open areas, and even if you know a lot about it, like I thought I did, and was being careful, I had a couple encounters, so I think it's important. One of the pictures is the seedlings. Now, Ann showed a close-up, and this was in an open area I had, so I mentioned it really loves open areas. All the seeds came in, so I came in and I started weed whacking. I found out it's, as I mentioned, it's very sappy, it's very moist, and the weed whacker throws those bits all over. And so I thought I was being careful, but the next day, and I think that's key, is it takes a day or two for the blisters to come up. I had these blisters on my neck, and I finally figured out the weed whacker had thrown these bits up, and it takes several days for the blisters to go away, and then maybe a couple weeks until it's all gone, if you don't have a severe case. And I think that's more typical if you just kind of have a minor encounter with it. That's what happens. If you do get those blisters, you don't want to disturb them. If they itch, you can put some hydrocortisone cream on or a cold, damp cloth, but just kind of let the skin heal naturally. So that was the first with these seedlings encounter. So, and actually this is the second generation, those that I cut down. So I went back with a weed whacker, but full winter gear.
Yeah.
You know, I covered all skin. I don't recommend that in the heat of summer. It wasn't pleasant. So yeah, exactly. So then I went back and, you know, I've used herbicide. But this is the second generation. It came back in 2 weeks. So then the second time I was out, I was weeding around the perennial. I said, okay, these are the seedlings. I don't want to disturb them. I'm not going to pull them, and you know, but I was looking for some labels and doing a little weeding. The next day, blisters on my hand. I hadn't been wearing gloves. So now I wear gloves up to here if I get anywhere near them. If they're big stems, I will cut them. And the next picture I showed shows a close-up of what Ann was showing in the field. They like those open areas, but they do fine in a 5-foot grass field here, and they will just cover that, and they will crowd out the grass. Is
there anything you can do?
Well, what I do is first I go in with, if they're thick stems, with a lopper and cut those and get them out before I do anything if I'm going to work in that area. And then when I go, if it's a field like that, I brought a picture of a tool. It's a hedge trimmer. I said, well, let's do like the state does and go along the roads. And that's a 3-foot blade on that. It's portable. It's battery powered. And with some of the batteries now, you can get an hour or more on this. It's got a telescoping handle, a swiveling head, so you don't have to bend over much, and you can go through and just cut down. If the stems are less than an inch or so wide, you can just mow that grass and all right down. But again, if they're thick stems, or if they're thinner stems but they're in a perennial bed and you don't want to mow all your perennials down, go in with those loppers first and you know, get the parsnip out. And the problem is you take it out, as our producer Will Michael found out last year, and it came back. One, because it's biennial and you have all these rosettes of leaves that are just waiting next year to send up those stalks. And even if you come back then and mow it, you've still got all these weed seeds, as you saw from Ann's picture, just so many out there. Those seeds are just, I remember about 15 years ago, I had one plant in my field, and now it's just all throughout, and it is just blown in from everywhere. So it's going to be tough. I think key is you just have to really keep after it, and just each year go in and get it out as much as you can.
All right, well, along with parsnips, another problem are ticks, of course, and Leonard, you have some tick tools?
We've talked about ticks before, and the things, repellents to use in clothing, but if you do happen to get them, there's some things to be aware of. Don't try to pinch them off and mash them.
Don't
because,
squeeze them.
Yeah, that does not work. It makes it worse. But if you have some very fine tweezers, you don't want to mash them with thin ones, but get some very fine tweezers like this. That's one option, but better is what you can get at most drugstores, and that's this tick remover. It's called a tick key, and you basically just put it on over the tick and pull it, and that kind of releases them because they're kind of dug in and hold on. I found this, you can find these online. I found it in Travels this year. It's tick pliers. It has a little magnifier on it. It opens up and it's very tight, and you put it on the skin there and just grab it, and it really holds it, and you just pull
And
it
I
right
like that
off.
because it has like a little scoop, so it keeps
Yeah,
it there so that you can dispose of it. It doesn't go flying around
So-
your bathroom, and then you're like, oh no, now where is it? Now, Ann, what else has been cropping up in your diagnostic lab?
Well, Leonard mentioned how much he's been watering, and so we're starting to see some scorch symptoms on leaves of trees, and I brought one picture. This is what it looks like. Anytime you see leaf edge dieback on a tree like that, that's typically, it tells me for some reason the water's not getting out to those outer leaves, and it's typically because it's so dry. So if you've got a new tree, I guess you'd probably want to make sure it did get that inch of water each week and water deeply, and to try to avoid that. The other thing I'm seeing too is another remnant of this hot weather, and that's called sun scald, and that's this is on pepper, and it's when the foliage is not covering those fruit, but it gets exposed to the sun, usually on an upper shoulder, and causes that damage. You can cut that out and eat it, it's fine. The other thing it can that we're seeing too is an abiotic disorder called blossom end rot, and that's on peppers and tomatoes. At the blossom end, it sort of dies back, and that's because of calcium and water fluctuation, usually on the first fruit. So if you mulch and water well, you usually won't see that on the next fruit.
Okay, good. And what else have we got?
Oh, there's another pest that we're seeing. It's called squash vine borer. It's got a beautiful adult. The adults are there on the left. And then they lay an egg at the base of thick-stemmed squash plants, and they lay an egg, and this inch-long white larvae develops. And what you see in your garden is wilted plants. So always when you're seeing wilted plants, look at the base of the stem for that larvae and dig that out. You can use row cover, rotate.
And what else have we got?
Let's see, another, I guess Vern Grubinger covered this earlier, but we've got ripening berries, and that's when spotted wing Drosophila shows up. So you want to protect your berries from this pest. The best way to do it is with fine netting, and you can exclude the pest that way. As soon as the berries start ripening, you cover that. If you want to make sure and find out if your berries do have this pest, you could do a saltwater test where you put 100 of the fruit in a cup of water to 1 tablespoon of salt, and the larvae will come out. So that's how you know if you've got them or not.
Excellent. Well, August is a big vacation month, Leonard. You have a couple of day trips coming up that you want to recommend?
Yeah, just wanted to show an example of a place. We actually went on a tour this summer, Berkshire Botanic Garden down in Stockbridge, Mass. It's only about an hour south of the Vermont border, south of Bennington, so makes a good trip to a lot of good gardens within a nice day's drive. But this is great. It has many gardens. Here's the vegetable garden, as you see there. They have a wonderful daylily garden, arranged chronologically, some of the top varieties from the early ones to some of the more recent ones. Just gorgeous. They have art in the garden each year, some perennial borders there. This is a little garden hut. It's beautiful.
I love that.
This was designed by Martha Stewart.
Of course.
So, with a little green roof on it. This is their newest building. It's a gallery. They have art in there. They do cooking classes. But right inside the door is this wonderful living green wall, plants planted in pots, all vertical on the wall there. So just a great place. But we do have a tour coming up September 17th to the Montreal Botanic Gardens. We have lots of interest, but we still have a few spots in it. So if interested, people can go to my website. I've got a link there with all the registration information and details.
Terrific. And Ann, if gardeners have questions, UVM Extension has an important resource.
Yeah, Master Gardener Helpline. We're busy all the time, so give us a call.
Because this is a very busy time of
Yes,
year
it is. Yeah.
for questions and pests and bugs
Yeah,
and such.
exactly.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you.
That's our program for today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.